Alright, so for this video I want to diverge a bit from my original plan of adding new moves and abilities, and instead see how quickly we can get a training mode and a multiplayer proof of concept working for Glyph Gambit. Overall, both of these features together took about one full day of work, even with AI tools. There was definitely some friction, especially around Steam networking, syncing state between machines, and just not having prior experience building multiplayer games with Steam. But we got there, and the learning process was honestly a big part of the value. I started by adding a training mode. Here was the initial prompt I gave Codex. Can we add a training mode to our game? There should be a training button on the main menu that opens a loadout screen where we can configure both armies, pieces, and items, using everything currently unlocked in the save file. There should be two loadout grids, one for the top army and one for the bottom army. The game should be fully turn-based with no AI and controlled by the player on both sides. It took about 30 minutes, but Codex pretty much nailed it on the first pass. At that point, I was essentially playing against myself, which is exactly what I wanted. Once that was working, I realized this training mode was actually a perfect foundation for a multiplayer proof of concept. The idea was simple. Launch two instances of the game locally, have one act as the host and the other as a client, and see if we could coordinate moves between them. I was able to establish a connection between the two instances, but I couldn't move pieces on the client side. From the behavior, it was clear that the client wasn't receiving move updates from the host. So I asked Codex to modify the run scripts so that each instance would write to a separate log file, allowing us to differentiate between host and client behavior. That made debugging much easier. After some iteration, I could finally see move updates flowing correctly between both instances. At that point, we had a working multiplayer proof of concept. Next, I wanted to see if I could take this a step further and integrate Steam networking properly. I learned that Steam provides a system called Steam Datagram Relay, or SDR, which is designed specifically for peer-to-peer multiplayer between Steam users. Codex spent some time setting up the Steam API, but it initially tried pulling dependencies from a repository called Codeberg, which I hadn't heard of before. I stopped it there and did some investigation using the regular ChatGPT interface. From what I could tell, Codeberg is actively maintained and reasonably trustworthy, about as much as any public code repository can be. So I gave Codex the green light, and it continued integrating the library. Eventually, it generated a new build script and explained that I needed a Steam app ID file so I could test multiplayer locally without publishing the game. That let me run the binaries directly. I also created a script to sync builds to my Steam Deck using rsync instead of SCP, which makes updates much faster since it only transfers changed files. I set up Steam launch options so the game would log properly and added the build as a non-Steam game inside Steam. If you're testing on a Steam Deck, you'll need to do this from desktop mode as well, and we have it. One copy of the game running on my PC, one on the Steam Deck, playing against each other. Overall, this wasn't painless, but it also wasn't overwhelming. I helped accelerate the learning process rather than replace it. Getting a multiplayer proof of concept working in about a day would have felt unrealistic to me not that long ago. I don't want to dive too deep into the technical specifics here. Part of the point is to encourage people to try using AI to fill in those gaps themselves. LLMs are becoming a new programming abstraction layer, and word-to-code workflows are already incredibly efficient, and they're only going to get better. Thanks for tuning in. Leave a comment with your thoughts on AI and game development, or any ideas you have for the Glyph Gambit remaster.